You got Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Mark Farzetta in for Johnny Mac. We've got Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation jumping in with us. First things first. You feel okay, BLJ?
I do. Feel much better than last week.
We missed you last week, but we're glad we got you today. All right, same thing I asked Jeff Kerr last hour. I get it. The Eagles cut from 90 down to 70, and they're not even official, but the reporting is probably pretty good and accurate, including on Bleeding Green Nation, of those guys who've already been told their service is no longer needed. I don't think any of those 20 guys you can say, oh, my God, I thought he was not only going to be on the 53, but would be playing for the Eagles. Yeah, there's none of those. But in comparison to some of the 17 guys that they still have to cut, there might be a surprise or two. What surprised you most of the list of 20 that's already out there?
Well, I had Tyree Jackson on my 53.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I didn't think he was a lock or anything, but I thought, there's a chance they could keep him. I mean, they kept him all around last year. Howie Roseman cited Tyree Jackson and his development as something they were excited about after they traded Zach Ertz in 2021. So I thought, okay, maybe they don't give up on him yet. Maybe they think there's still upside there. I don't think it's crazy. They've carried 4 tight ends on their roster in the past. It's not something unprecedented, but yeah, I didn't think he was a lock, but I would say, and it's funny enough because too, he was the first cut that was leaked out there. But yeah, he's the most surprising so far.
BLG, I need to get to the bottom of this. This is a guy that's obviously making the roster, and that's Devonta Smith. 4 hours of sleep. Okay. Jody, you've done it. BLG, you've done it, I'm sure. Yep. A lot of people in our chat have done this. You got to go on 4 hours of sleep every once in a while, and we're not running around a football field, especially in training camp. We're not doing it, obviously, in the preseason or anything like that. 4 hours of sleep a night for Devonta Smith. I know he was asked, like, what do you do for the 4 hours that you're not sleeping with the average person getting 8 hours of sleep? Mm-hmm. So how does he function with only 4 hours of sleep, my friend?
Well, apparently really well. I mean, because he had a great training camp and he looked really good. I mean, maybe that's the secret to success. Maybe we all need to train ourselves to sleep even less because Devonta Smith looked great this summer. And I think, he could reach like a new level. So somehow him not sleeping is resulting in him looking great.
I need you to do one thing. So they asked him about the naps. And they said, well, that's it. Just 4 hours. He goes, well, I do nap, but it's my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. Like, how long are those naps? I gotta know. Are they 2 hours? Because he can do that. I can see the 6 hours total to sleep a day, but yeah, man, maybe if he does sleep a full 8 hours, we're looking at a guy that Darius Slate predicted would be, one day the greatest wide receiver in the NFL.
I do think he relaxes a lot, and I think he's talked about that too because he's a homebody. He doesn't like to, be out and about and doing things when he's not at the NovaCare complex. So maybe there's some of that in there. He might not be, full REM sleeping but, for a full 8 hours or whatever, but he seems like he's getting enough relaxation in that he's able to be well rested.
Maybe he took some notes from Herschel Walker because Herschel was another one of those, I don't like to sleep because I could be doing something else kind of guy. Yeah, I like to sleep. Sorry. But don't ask me that question, Fozzie. Will go right over my head. I need my 7 hours minimum. Otherwise, I'm pretty damn useless. All right. BLG, let me ask you about the fact that the Eagles once again this year decided less is more in preseason, in practice, in the games, guys not even playing, not dressing and the like. I got on their case for it last year before the season started. They end up in the Super Bowl, so I had to eat crow and admit, yeah, they probably know better than me. They doubled down on it this year and playing guys even less. You got any concerns week one? Not even all I asked Farsi about the whole Brady celebration thing. Put that aside and say it has no factor. Is this team ready to go week number one, do you think? At the top of their level?
I think so. I mean, that has not been an issue for them in the past. I think about the Falcons game in 2021, Sirianni's first ever. Eagles got off to a hot start. Last year against the Lions, they had that big lead. Things got a little closer towards the end there, but they certainly started strong. So I've seen no evidence that, they're going to start slow just because they didn't do anything. Now, you could say they didn't play in the preseason at all, a lot of the starters, whereas the past couple of years, they at least got like a drive or so. But is that one drive going to make world's difference? I don't tend to believe that. I think they got plenty of good work in the 15 training camp practices they ended up having, which is, I think, the same number they had last year. So I think that's fine enough.
BLG, when you look at this offensive line, it doesn't seem like the depth is there. I know one of the guys that was released that at least raised my eyebrows was Dennis Kelly, just because I know they'd like to have some veterans back there, especially a guy that can play multiple positions. Thought he had a decent preseason, got out there on the big Trey Sermon run, made a nice block upfield. But when you look at, or downfield, when you look at the backup positions here on the offensive line, is it thin? Cam Jurgens, simple as that, the backup center? Tyler Steen goes in there as the right guard. When you look at the backup positions on that O-line, is this the thinnest they've been in a while?
It's all relative, right? I mean, I think there are teams out there that have question marks at multiple starting spots, and the Eagles don't have that. So certainly you'll take that. I think relative to last year, though, you don't have Andre Dillard, who, for all his faults, had certainly kind of come on a little bit and proven to be a quality option off the bench at left tackle, where now you kind of have questions. I mean, is it even going to be for sure Tyler Steen, who I thought did some good things in camp and probably should be that left tackle there? Or is it Fred Johnson, who it seems like the Eagles are going to keep after giving him that contract extension? So there's more question marks here. They've certainly lost some of the depth that they've had in terms in the past, Coyote, Awashika, Jack Anderson, and Andre Dillard, who I just mentioned. So they've had a kind of a little bit of a drain of talent from their youth specifically through different methods. And, that's just kind of the name of the game when it comes to those bottom of the roster guys. You can't hold on to everyone always. You're going to have to make cuts at some point, and some guys are going to shake free. But I think overall, it's not a unit when we're talking about their backup offensive line that I think is an amazing unit. But I still think if you're comparing it to other teams' backup offensive lines, I think it's fine enough, and they should be able to piece things together.
BLJ, we all believe again, I'm speaking for everybody. I shouldn't do that. I believed, and others with me believed, that Zach McPherson was going to be the backup slot cornerback. Not happening, done for the season with the injury he suffered. Avonte Maddox is very good in the slot, one of the better slot cornerbacks in the league, but he has a history of injuries. He always seems to miss at least part of the season. When Maddox goes down with an injury this year, who's stepping into the slot?
It's a great question. And it's interesting too, because I don't think Maddox has had a great camp. It's not to the point where, cut him, he's bad, but there's enough of a track record with him in his career where I think you have to give him some benefit of the doubt. And also, he started out camp still recovering from the toe injury that he was dealing with late last season. He didn't participate in OTAs at all. So maybe some of this is just him still getting healthy. And, there's still some time here before the season kicks off on September 10th. But it's a fair question. And I think a lot of these 53-man roster projections out there don't necessarily account for that in terms of who's going to back up Maddox in the slot. And like you mentioned, Jody, I think that's an important role to have on the team. Last year, the Eagles had Josiah Scott there. He clearly wasn't good enough. The opposing offenses were picking on him as a weak point. I think, right now it seems like Mario Goodrich might be that guy. He seems to be dealing with like a groin injury as well. So we'll see how serious that is. And, if the Eagles need to put him on IR or anything and then, carry him through and figure that out. But if it's not Goodrich, there is really no amazing answer there. There's no surefire. It might just be something they have to piece together. Maybe you put Terrell Edmonds down there in the box or something. You might have to get creative with it because you don't have a surefire option.
All right. So on that note, James Bradberry was talking to the media yesterday about how he's never played the slot position before. He had messed around, his words, not mine. He had messed around, fooled around with it when he was in Carolina with the Panthers. And then he said, if we were playing man and I had to follow my guy and I was the inside guy, it was just what happened. But he's never played under the title of, nickel corner by any means. So what do I read into it? Is it just a matter of testing versatility, getting his feet wet in case he does need to play that position from time to time, maybe against CeeDee Lamb or something like that in the division? What should I take away from him playing the slot corner position?
Yeah, I think that's going to be matchup specific. The Eagles were doing that a lot when, the Browns came to town, and the Browns have David Njoku, a massive athletic tight end in there. And I think the Eagles kind of wanted Bradberry matched up against him. So I definitely think there could be certain situations where Bradberry is matched up against a certain player there in the slot. I think, like as you mentioned, CeeDee Lamb could be a good situation for the Eagles or something they might want to explore there, certainly. But, I don't think it's something where, Bradberry's going to be in there permanently and they're going to have him there and Slay on the outside and Josh Jobe Although, again, unless maybe they don't feel good about their backup slot option, that is something they can do in the meantime until they find another option back there. Because I think Josh Jobe had a really good training camp, and I think he deserves to be that top backup. But yeah, again, more matchup specific, and that seems to be something we can expect potentially out of Sean Desai, is that he's going to experiment more with these things than the previous defensive coordinator did.
All right, so let's go there. Matchup specific. You're right. The previous coordinator last year had 2 linebackers and they played almost every single snap. He had 2 safeties and they played almost every single snap. There was no substituting. There was no positional matchup. It was the best guys on the field at basically all times. The Eagles aren't near as set at those 2 positions as they were last year. I think Reed Blankenship is close to a lock to be one of those locks to play every single snap. After that, I'm not so sure, including Nakobe Dean. I think he's going to play 98, 90, but maybe it's only 90, and maybe they only have one linebacker on the field, and they think Cummings is actually a better chance on a matchup-driven play. How much matchup-driven is Desai going to be? You opened up the door, now walk through it. How much of that is Sean Desai actually going to do?
Well, we've seen enough evidence in training camp to make me think he will tinker to some extent. And, I think there was a tweet out there from the Honest NFL recently about how the 2021 Bears were, one of the more matchup specific teams in the league when Sean Desai was their defensive coordinator and would do different things week to week as opposed to just having their philosophy and purely sticking to that. Now, I always think that sounds nice, but isn't always the most practical to implement because, you've limited practice time. So certainly, changing things around all the time isn't just necessarily the easy answer. I mean, it sounds good, but, in practice, it's a little bit different. But again, I think we've seen enough evidence from Desai in terms of being willing to do different things that we haven't seen before and experimenting in practice. That leads me to believe he will be doing that to some extent in the games, assuming that, those experimentations are yielding any kind of success.
I'm going to ask you about the buzzword that everybody loves, blitz. And if I told any Eagles fan before last season they're going to have 70 sacks, they would have lost their damn mind. How excited they would have been. But then I would have said, they're not really going to blitz a lot. Oh, well, that's not as much fun. But they have a linebacker there in Nakobe Dean that was pretty good at blitzing when he was, in college. Granted, college, but he's built more for a blitz, quicker, faster, than TJ Edwards. So, do you have personnel? I think all great coaches or coordinators coach to what they have. So would that lend you also to believe that might be something that Eagles fans will see a little bit more often than what they saw under Jonathan Gannon, which is actually sending a linebacker into the backfield? Not that Jonathan Gannon never did it, but just you might see it more with Desai and Nakobe Dean.
I don't think radically. I don't think, night and day kind of a thing here. I think, look, the Eagles view their defense for any flaws it had as a pretty successful unit last year, and I don't think they're looking to reinvent the wheel. And I think you look at the Fangio background, which Sean Desai comes from, and I don't think that's just that's not necessarily the calling card of that defense. Is sending the blitz and what he decided with the Bears. They were not the most blitz heavy team in the NFL. So just track record alone, I don't expect that to be, the big identity of the defense. Again, it is possible they do a little bit more than Gannon did because you talk about Nakobe Dean. I think that's a great point. He was really good at that at Georgia. So certainly you want to play to your players' strengths here. But I will believe that they're blitzing more when I see that they are blitzing more.
All right, BLG, I'm going to have to walk you through this question to explain what I want to try and get out of you. I'm going to describe Kenneth Gainwell as a tangerine. And here's what I mean by that. I want to compare a tangerine to an orange, not an apple to an orange, because I don't think there's any chance that Kenny Gainwell can just step into the shoes and get the same usage that Miles Sanders got last year. I think he's got a chance to be the Eagles' number 1 back and get more carries and touches than anybody else, but not the level that Miles did. So I want to compare a tangerine to an orange instead of a tangerine to an apple. You got faith in Kenny Gainwell as a tangerine, the Eagles' lead back?
I think it's possible that he ends up with the plurality. That's the key word here. I think that's any kind of running back we're going to be talking about here. It's not the majority of the touches here in the backfield. It's the plurality of them. And, it's interesting because you look at the training camp reps and Kenny Gainwell by far and away was the top back with the first team offense. But I have a hard time believing that this running back situation isn't going to be fluid throughout the course of the season because you have multiple options here. I think that DeAndre Swift probably is, has the most juice potentially or most dynamic when you're considering pass catching ability as well. And I think, he's going to have a role. And I think that if he's really excelling in that role, he's only going to be fighting for more playing time. And I think Kenny Gainwell is a nice player, but I don't think he's so good that it's impossible that someone or multiple players could outshine him and work their way into the rotation and warrant more touches. So I think this is something that's going to evolve through the course of the season in terms of who's looking good, who's not, are there fumbling issues, matchup specific. I'll use that term again because I think, certain weeks, maybe the running backs are going to be more involved in the passing game. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's a game where it calls for more of a physical runner. Maybe that's a Rashad Penny week. Maybe it's late in the season. Maybe it's the playoffs. Maybe you're like, okay, well, we don't need to save Rashad Penny at this point because we're making this push here for the Super Bowl. So I think there's a lot of different variables and factors that are going to go into this rotation.
Fair enough. I think the running back room is, like you said, matchups, mix of players, going to be whoever the hot hand is kind of thing. When it comes to running the football, I've said that DeAndre Swift, I think, gets the most touches, but Kenny Gainwell gets the most rushes. I think that's the way it's going to shake out in the backfield. As far as the evolution of a position could go, I want to ask you about the safety position. My guess would be Terrell Edmunds is the number one guy next to Reed Blankenship, and then maybe Sidney Brown creeps in there. But, of course, that's been one of the battles to watch throughout training camp in the preseason. So by week one and then maybe a little bit beyond that, how do you think that safety position looks for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, not settled. Definitely as we're approaching week one. I mean, I Reed Blankenship. I had a great camp. I think he's going to be a really good player. I really am excited about Reed Blankenship's upside. But as to who is starting next to him, I mean, it could be Justin Evans week one. Like, he's been getting a lot of first team reps, and that's not something I really necessarily feel good about. Edmonds seems to be in the mix, but I think the Eagles also kind of want to use him in a quasi kind of linebacker role in the box. So there's a lot to be determined there still. I think that's another position where, like just talked about running back, you kind of have to figure it out to some extent as you go and see who's playing well. I think Sidney Brown, will emerge at some point, but I don't know that things are really trending in a way where he's going to be your week one starter and you're not looking back at all. I think the Eagles are kind of want to be a little bit more cautious with him. I think he will be getting snaps on a more rotational basis until he totally just leaves no doubt and seizes that starting job at some point, but that's not from the jump.
All right, BLG. The Eagles have shown by the way they've handled their business since Sirianni was hired that they believe in coaching in the classroom, that they can accomplish a lot in meetings, breaking down video and the like. Why would we put a player at risk out there on the field when we can just break down the film and get them up to speed? If the right guy is cut in the next 48 hours, and that's at the quarterback position, is there any chance that they cut Marcus Mariota and grab that quarterback and say, we think he's actually better? Understanding that we got to get him like up to speed in 5 days with all just meetings and a couple of snaps in practice. Not ideal, but is there a chance that the Eagles will change their backup quarterback? I'm okay with the kid. I'd go ahead and elevate McKee, but a lot of people are saying no chance, no shot. You got to have NFL experience in your backup quarterback. If an experienced backup quarterback gets cut, do you think the Eagles have interest?
I mean, it's not that they're not going to look at it. I think at the end of the day, though, Marcus Mariota is going to be here. And look, I think people are Mariota did not have a good summer. No doubt about it. I was there for training camp. Didn't look good. We all saw the preseason games. But I don't know that he was that much worse, and potentially he was better than Gardner Minshew last year, who also didn't look good in training camp. So I just don't remember the same kind of freak out for that for whatever reason. I think he was a little better in the preseason games, but still in the practices, he was not good at all. So I think there's a little bit too much of a freak out. And I think Mariota, you can't just dismiss that, this is a guy with 87 games played, 74 career starts, including or plus 2 playoff starts. Like that's not nothing. And you look at the fact that, his passing ability, rough, but what he can do on the ground is not nothing again. with his legs and, a run-heavy Eagles offense, that could potentially work. Probably not for an extended period of time, but if Hurts gets hurt for a game, and that's kind of what he's been the past couple of years, missed 2 games, missed 1 game, maybe he can get through. And if he can't get through that 1 game and he is a total disaster, I think that's the point where you kind of flip the switch and you say, okay, Tanner McKee did enough here to shorten the leash that Marcus Mariota had. And then I think you go to him after that, because I think McKee, what he showed is real. And I don't think it's to the point where right now you push that button. I think you give Mariota a chance, but I don't think you give him a big chance.
Brandon, I can't remember a time where Eagles players, especially the veterans, spoke so highly of an incoming rookie class like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. And yesterday, Brandon Graham was asked about, hey, you're going to the year 14 in your career, why keep coming back, that kind of thing. And he said, well, sacking the quarterback is fun. And then he went on to talk about the young guys and helping them along and coaching them up and kind of being that veteran leader. And essentially what he was talking about was his legacy and how, years down the line, he wants Nolan Smith and he wants Jalen Carter to be that type of player to that incoming rookie class. But when it comes to just the thing that matters most, play on the field, Fletcher Cox, Darius Slay, Brandon Graham has talked about Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. Like, these guys are going to be impact players from jump. And I can't remember a time where veterans were more excited to see the debut of rookies than this veteran leadership on this team talking about this rookie class. How impressive have they been while watching them, not just in the preseason, obviously, but at camp?
I think Jalen Carter, was really like starting to come on here towards the end of camp. I mean, I was there the day when he pancaked Joel Bitonio, like a 5-time Pro Bowler, multi-time All-Pro kind of guard to the ground. As a rookie, that's crazy. And it also kind of lines up with what the things we've heard from these veterans as you're talking about. Specifically, Jason Kelsey has mentioned, Jalen Carter's power is unreal. And we saw that on display. And I think Nolan Smith did a lot of good things. I think Brandon Graham sees like a younger version of himself to some extent in terms of at least the energy that Nolan Smith brings to this team. So, yeah, it's an exciting thing to have these young guys coming in here. And look, the Eagles need that. They're at the point in their process here with Jalen Hurts on this mega contract where the young guys are going to have to play. And that's not something that they really had last year for the most part. I think Britton Covey may have ended up like the most snaps or the most impactful rookie by the end of last season when all things were said and done. But you need these young rookies this year and the guys from the 2022 draft class as well to really step up and be not only contributors now, but ideally, hopefully, the next core of this team.
All right, BLG, I need a prediction from you. And this is something that we may, after the fact, have to go, yeah, we still don't know. But I'm going to ask you to predict ahead of time. I like some of the stances you took about both the offense and the defense in maybe being more positionally matchup guided than they have been in the past. We've gone through the preseason, the joint practices, the regularly scheduled preseason games, which the Eagles handled differently than everyone else in the National Football League. I got no idea what Sean Desai and their new offensive coordinator are going to do. I don't know that they've given us anything to judge because they play their cards close to the vest. That's Eagle requirement. Coaching 101 coming down from the top. Which of the two coordinators will we know more about after week 1? Who will show their hand more offensively or defensively? We go, all right, well, that's what this new coach is going to do as compared to the guy he's replacing. Who is going to be the coordinator that will have a better feel or a bigger question mark after week number 1?
I think we're going to see some different things with the offense in week 1, or maybe I think early on the season, if not the first game, literally, because there was a lot of early in camp, especially running backs being involved in the passing game. And last year, if I'm not mistaken, the Eagles, I think, passed the ball to the running backs fewer than any team in the league.
Any team in the NFL, the least quarterback to running back combos.
And look, part of that's you have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So why do you need to pass to the running back? There's not really a need for that when you have those 3 guys. But I do think, again, it's not like the whole offense is going to be centered around that. But I do think we will see it a little bit more. And I think that's a different dynamic I think the short game as a whole is something interesting to think about because you also add, Olamide, Zacchaeus in there, and maybe you're working underneath a little bit more to complement those big plays down the field. But yeah, I think we'll see some tweaks in that regard with running backs being a little bit more involved with the offense early. Defensively, I mean, I'm not expecting to see, again, a night and day kind of thing here. There might be certain matchups that look more out of character relative to last year in terms of a player following someone or, Bradberry going into the slot, something like that. But I think it's the offense that's really going to have all the attention anyway.
BLG, we appreciate you jumping in with us. Thank you very much for a couple minutes. Glad to hear you're feeling better. Be on top of Bleeding Green Nation all week with the valuations. The Eagles cut down the roster, and we are now just 13 days away from the Eagles season getting started. We will have BLG on plenty during the year. Thank you very much for jumping in today, Brandon.
Take it easy, guys.
Nice, brother.
Brandon Lee Gowton, Bleeding Green Nation, here with us on Birds 365. All right, Mark Farzetta in for Johnny Mac with me, Jody Mac. Come back, put a bow on the show on a Football Monday.